Hey there, future college students. My name's Kevin Landry, and I am the co-owner of the Extra Point ACT Prep Company. I am also a high school math teacher during the day. Now, my question for you today is this. Are you getting the improvement that you need on the ACT just by watching the ACT tips and strategy videos that are all over YouTube and also on our YouTube channel? Now, as ACT prep professionals for the last 10 years, we know that ACT tips and strategies are very important. You do need to have pacing strategies and test strategies and things of that nature. But if you want to get the really big jumps, the 3 and 4 and 5 points improvement, you really have to know your ACT skills. Now, before we get too far into what ACT math skills that you need for the test, do me a quick favor and subscribe to our channel and hit the bell notification so that you'll be up to date on more videos like these. We're going to be doing a whole series of playlists on all of the most common ACT math questions that you can see on the test, and you don't want to miss any of those particular videos that'll be coming out in the near future. Okay, so the purpose of this video and video series is to actually provide you with the ACT math skills that you need to make those big jumps on the ACT math test. Now, after researching the ACT for the better part of a decade, I know a couple things really well about the ACT math test. The first one is the ACT math does not necessarily look like what's in your textbook. The math skills that you learn in school are what's tested on the ACT math. However, the questions that you get from your textbook and from your teacher generally do not look like what's on the actual ACT. In order to hit those big jumps on the ACT, you really need to practice what the questions look like on the actual ACT math test. The second thing that I know about the ACT math is that it can actually be very predictable from time to time. The ACT ends up using the same questions repeatedly, or questions that look so similar they might as well be the same questions. If you want to improve on the ACT math, you just need to practice those questions. If you practice those questions a lot, you'll get those big jumps in your ACT math score. Your pacing on the ACT math test will also improve as well. Now, for these videos, I've picked out the most common ACT math skills that are tested, and then I've gone into those skills and I've picked out the most common ACT questions that come from those ACT math skills. Now, before you watch the rest of this video, what I really would like you to do is I'd like you to go into the description of this video, and there's a document there that I use for the remainder of the video. It's got a handful of math questions on it. I'd like you to stop the video, give yourself about 5 minutes to work those math questions, and then come back and play the remainder of this video and see how you did. Not only will I give you the answers, I will also show you some very good strategies to work these ACT math questions. So not only are you going to get to learn all of the ACT math skills, I will show you some strategies that go along with it as well. Good luck, and I'll see you at the end of the video. When you finish, I'll give you some more information on some good ACT math prep that you can also use along with these videos. All right, let's just jump on right into our pre-algebra questions that are dealing with math vocabulary. Now, you're going to hear me reiterate this quite a few times in this playlist. So if you go through the whole playlist for pre-algebra, I'll say this a few more times, but here's the thing about pre-algebra on the ACT. There's generally, give or take, 14 questions out of the 60. So that's pretty close to 25% of the whole test. Now, that doesn't mean that all 14 questions are necessarily going to be easy. However, you can anticipate that a large portion of these are going to be easier than other questions on the test. So this is vital that A, you get them 100% correct, but B, you really can't spend a lot of extra time on these problems. You have to know these skills, you have to be ready to jump in, and you have to get these done quickly or be ready to move on and come back to them later. So this is important practice that you're going to do right here, and you just need to make sure that you see as many varieties of these problems as we can. Now, in this particular video, we're actually focusing on math vocabulary. The ACT does not tend to directly question you on math vocabulary. It's more of an indirect questioning. They will embed terms in the actual question, and if you don't know what that math vocabulary means, then you're going to have a really difficult time trying to figure out how to answer the question. So sometimes it's just a direct, hey, do you know what this is? A lot of times it's just a kind of a implied message there. So hopefully what you've done at this point, you've printed the document that we provided to you down in the description section. And what I would suggest to you at this point, if you haven't done this already, is try to work the 5 questions. Give yourself a 5-minute timer. See if you can do this in less than 5 minutes. And then once you've done that, come back to this video and actually watch the explanations. It shouldn't take us very long to do this. We've got some very straightforward questions. The other thing that I want to kind of imply here is I've tried to give you a nice variety, but I've also tried to pick out questions that pop up pretty frequently on the ACT. So some of these questions have been done over and over again in the past. So kind of keep that in mind. All right, let's jump into this first one. It says, which of the following number properties is illustrated in the statement below? Now, this would seem like the most basic question in the world. You've got associative, commutative, distributive, identity, and inverse. But there is a little bit of a trick here. If you understand the associative property, you're like, oh, there's three values. So what typically happens when you have the associative property is you have an A plus a B plus a C, and the B plus C is grouped off. And then you have an A plus a B plus a C, and the AB is grouped off. And we basically say that these two would be equal to each other. And so the way that the ACT has structured this question, it looks like that may be what the answer is. And a lot of students would get tricked by the first answer choice, A, as being associative property. But I want you to take a closer look here. In the parentheses, we have 5 plus 4 both times. In the associative property, however, what's in the parentheses actually changes. It gets regrouped in the associative properties. So what has actually happened is the ACT has tried to trick you with this, and what this really is an A plus B with the whole term 5 plus 4 representing one thing, and then we flip it around to B plus A. So this is technically the commutative property, so the correct answer choice will be B. So again, you could probably see this in the first 5 to 10 questions on any ACT math test, and you just have to be sure that you're paying attention to what they're giving you and making good choices. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, here's a great example of the ACT using math vocabulary to see if you know what it's talking about. And then they use confusing language here. It says, what is the smallest integer? So there's your vocabulary term. If you don't know what an integer is, you're probably not going to understand what the question is asking you. Now, the nice thing about this is all answer choices here, A through E, are all integers. If they gave us some decimals or some radicals, then you might be thinking, oh, I can't remember which one's which. But in this case, all of the answer choices are actually integers. What's tricky about this problem is they say two different opposite things, smallest and greater. So the simplest way to do this is actually to convert radicals to a decimal. So we're going to take the square root of 85 and we're going to convert it to a decimal, which is roughly 9.2. And the decimal continues on, but that's all we really need. Now, I want to give you a visual example of this. If I were to kind of place this on a number line, and I had the number 9 and I had the number 10, we know that this value would come right in here somewhere. So the square root of 85, which is approximately 9.2, is going to be in that area of the number line. So we're looking for the smallest integer value, and we have two integer values here. We have a 9 and we have a 10, and notice we have a 9 and a 10 as our answer choice, but we want the one that's bigger. Now keep in mind here as well, 12 is also bigger, but 10 is smaller than 12. So we're looking for one that's greater than square root of 85, but it's the smallest integer. So that would give us 10 as the answer choice. So choice C is actually the correct answer. Again, a problem like this, once you dissect the language and you understand it, you should be able to use your calculator, immediately eliminate some obvious wrong answer choices, and be able to get this within a matter of seconds, hopefully, and not spend a lot of extra time on this. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, now we're dealing with a very popular ACT type question, and they give this format and structure to this question. They change it up every now and then again, and I'll give you an example as we go along. It says, what is the sum of 3 consecutive odd integers whose mean is 27. So first and foremost, we need to set up 3 consecutive odd integers. Well, you need to know what that looks like. So for instance, 3 consecutive odd integers, for example, would be 13, 15, and 17, or we could say 5, 7, and 9. That's 3 odd integers that are consecutive. However, we don't know what our actual odd integers are, so the easiest way to set that up is to say x plus 2 plus x plus 4. Now if you look at this, if our x were 5, x plus 2 would give us 7, and x plus 4 would be 5 plus 4, which would give us 9. So that's the 3 consecutive odd integers. Sometimes they'll just say the sum of 3 consecutive odd integers is, and you would say equals to the number, and you would solve for it. But they threw a little extra in here. They said, what is the mean? It says the sum of 3 consecutive odd integers whose mean is 27. Well, mean is a fancy name for average. So there, again, that is some mathematical language. Consecutive odd integers is a vocab. Mean is a vocab. And so what we want to do here is we want to take the average of these, and that's 3 numbers, and is equals to 27. And now we have a little equation to solve. So we'll go ahead and multiply both sides by 3 to eliminate the 3's, and then we'll consolidate like terms, and then we'll solve from x from here. That just gives us the first integer in the consecutive integers. It says, what is the sum of the 3 consecutive integers whose mean is 27? So now we need to go back and figure out what the other integers are. So if the first integer is 25, that means the next integer has to be 27 and then 29, and the sum of those would be 81, again giving us answer choice C as the correct answer. For all real numbers x, how many values of x are odd prime numbers? So there's our language, odd prime numbers that are less than 20. So there's the math vocabulary. So first of all, we need to know what a prime number is. And so a prime number is any number that the only factors are itself and 1. If we just make a list of all the prime numbers, you should know your prime number starting off and just going all the way up to at least 20, hopefully higher than that. But we'll just go ahead and start making a list since all of these are less than 20. So we're going to start off with 2 being the first prime number, then 3, 5, 7. 9 is not a prime number. And so what we have here is a list of all the prime numbers before we get to 20. But they stipulated odd. And if you recall from your definition of prime, 2 is the only even prime number available. So we're going to cancel that out because they only wanted the odd prime numbers, and then we're going to count these up. And so if you count these up, we have 7 numbers there in our list, so D would be the correct answer. Again, just some good examples of math vocabulary in an ACT question. All right, we got 2 more questions to go. They get a little bit more challenging here. Now, if you notice that this is kind of more of a conceptual question, it says if x is an odd integer and y is an even integer, or excuse me, y is even, then which of the following must be an even integer? When you look at a problem like this and you have 1, 2, and 3 there and they have variables in them, and then they're asking you which one would become even, it's kind of hard to know just by looking at that. So the simplest way to do questions like this is to actually define a value for x and y. If you can just plug numbers in, you'll have a good look at what is going to be an even integer. And you can pick any numbers that you want for x and y. But I'm going to give you a little recommendation here. Do not pick 0 and do not pick 1 whenever you're plugging numbers in, because they tend to have very special properties that can sometimes mess up these questions. So I would definitely start with 2 and then move up from there. I also don't recommend negatives, even though you have a calculator and you shouldn't mess up with negatives. Sometimes using negatives can throw students for a loop. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and define x and y as a given value. It said that x had to be an odd integer. So I'm just going to go ahead and make x equal to 3. And then it said y is even. So I'll just go ahead and make y equal to 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug this information in. So my first one is 2x plus 3y. So I'm going to say 2 times 3 plus 3 times y, which is my 2. And if I do the order of operations there, I'm going to end up getting a value of 12, which we know is an even integer. Okay, so that checks off. That's one of them that we know must be an even integer. And we followed the conditions that were given. So we'll go to the next one. We'll do x times y. So 3 times 2 equals 6. Again, that's an even integer. So we'll check off number 2. Lastly, we'll do 3 plus y minus 1. If we do this, we're going to get 4. Again, it's an even integer, so 3 works as well. Now, if you are unsure if this were the case, we know that by doing this that E is the correct answer because all 3 of them hold that condition. Try some different sets of numbers. So do x equals to 5 and y equals to 2, or whatever versions of odd integers and even integers that you want to use for x and y, and just go through the same process. Now you can see that this particular question is a little bit more time consuming than the previous questions that we've completed. So very important that you are quick and efficient with the easier questions so that you really are kind of buying yourself more time to do this type of strategy for math questions. And if you're unfamiliar with the strategy of plugging in numbers, check out another video that I have on math strategies, and we'll tell you a lot of the strategies that you'll hear us use and some of the videos in our playlist while we're working problems. All right, last problem. Again, another conceptual problem. If you look at the answers, lots of variables in them. And so we're going to probably spend a little time plugging numbers in here again. So it says if a and b are real numbers, such that a is greater than 0, or basically just a positive number, and b is less than 0, so technically a negative number, then which of the following is equivalent to the absolute value of a minus the absolute value of b? So again, this is a situation where I would need to define a and b and try to make them hold to what the problem is asking us, but give us easy numbers to plug in. And again, I'm going to avoid 0 or 1. Now, I can't avoid negatives this time because it's telling me that b has to be a negative number. So I'm going to just start with a equaling to 2 because it's a positive number, and b equaling to negative 3. And I stayed away from negative 2 because I didn't want to get those two mixed up. I didn't want to accidentally plug b in for a or vice versa. So I kept the numbers distinct, with one being positive and one being negative. And I'm simply going to go in here and I'm going to plug this in to the given expression that was given to us. So if I do the absolute value of 2 minus the absolute value of negative 3, I'm going to get 2 minus 3, which is going to be a negative 1. So basically now what I'm doing is I'm going to go back through the answer choices, and again we're going to use a and b, and we're going to plug that in for the answer choices and see which one of these is going to match up with negative 1. Now, as you can probably tell already, this could be a time-consuming venture, but you're guaranteed more than likely to get 100% correct unless you make an arithmetic mistake. Now, keep in mind that there are absolute value properties and rules, and if you just happen to remember all those from pre-algebra, congratulations, you could probably find the correct answer right away. Or you may be conceptual enough in mathematics that you can look at that and be like, oh, I know that it has to be this answer, and that's great too. What I'm hoping to do is show the students who don't pick up on that right away some easy ways to guarantee that they're going to get the question right. So here we go with the long method. We're going to start off with the A choice. So we're going to say 2 minus a negative 3, and we're going to take the absolute value of that. And when we do that, that equals to 5, which is not negative 1, so we know that that is out. 2 plus a negative 3, absolute value, that equals to 1. We know that that one's out as well. Absolute value of 2 plus the absolute value of negative 3, that's also going to equal to 5. So that is out. 2 minus a negative 3, that's equal to 5. That's out. So that leaves E as the only remaining choice. you could probably stop right here and just say, oh, E is the answer. But I think it's probably a smart idea for you to just go ahead and do E. And here's why. It ends up equaling -1, and that verifies that E is the correct answer. What happens if I did E and it wasn't -1 either? That would definitely clue me into, uh-oh, I made a mistake either on the last part or I made a mistake on the previous 4. I don't want to just automatically assume that E is necessarily the correct answer because the other 4 weren't. That is what is being implied there, but you never know when you might make some basic mistakes. So at least I go ahead and confirm it. Go ahead and confirm that they're both equal to -1 and E is the correct answer choice. All right, I hope that was useful for you. I'm going to have tons of videos where I'm going to give you the most popular questions from the ACT in each of these categories. And so hopefully they won't take long for you to watch. If you just work the problems on the document that I've provided for you, and then you can even play this back at a faster speed, maybe 1.25 speed or faster, you can get through these videos really quickly and you can get a lot of practice for the ACT, which we have found to be the most effective way to improve your ACT score. So it's nice, all of the other videos that we have, ACT tips on how to improve your score fast, and all the various videos that are out there on YouTube are very nice. But we found that the quickest way to improve scores on the ACT is just to do a bunch of practice problems. Okay, now that you finished those problems, I hope they didn't give you too much trouble and you learned a few strategies to go along with them. So these are some of the ACT math pre-algebra skills that you're going to need for the ACT math test. Now, these are generally the easier questions and you should get these 100% correct. Now, there's 10 other videos that go along with ACT pre-algebra. So if you check in the description below, I've provided a little link to each of those videos. Also, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see the playlist. We'll have a playlist of the pre-algebra videos as well. And coming up a little bit later, we will also do playlists for the ACT math sections for Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, coordinate geometry, plane geometry, and trig. So basically keep an eye out for those. Always check back to our YouTube channel to see if they are up, and we will have playlists for those. Now, as far as ACT prep is concerned, we do have a very good ACT prep course that we provide online. It's very affordable, and if you follow us on our social media, we do give discounts from time to time for our online prep class. So be sure to follow us on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And also keep up with our YouTube channel because from time to time in videos I do give you coupon codes for discounts on our ACT online prep course. So for a very cheap price you can get a very, very good prep course. Many of our students go up 4, 5, 6 points. We've had students go up as much as 12 points using this program. So we look forward to seeing you in the future. Hopefully you'll take our course. If not, just keep watching our videos. That'll get you a long way to improving your ACT score. Thank you for helping us out. Share these videos with a friend. Tell as many of your friends as you can about them. We appreciate your support on our YouTube channel. And again, don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell for future notifications. Thank you.